Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. So glad you could join us on a Friday. And, you know, a story, sadly, that we've had to cover over the course of the last few weeks. It happened today after Christmas, a horrific car crash that took place on Desert Inn in Durango. It took 4 lives, a horrible situation. My understanding is a 17-year-old and a 10-year-old are still in the hospital, and people want to know. They want to know what happened, what caused this crash. Police are saying, and I'm going by what police are saying, is that a gentleman by the name of Tacuma Wesley caused the crash based on reckless driving. But we wanted to hear that side of it. We want to know. And we reached out to a gentleman by the name of Talib Kerns, who was the brother of Tacuma Wesley, who was so gracious enough to join us in studio today. First of all, Talib, thank you so much for being here. We said a little bit off the air, and let me just say I'm sorry for your loss and what your family is going through. It's a horrible situation. And I said a little bit to you off the air, I think it is extremely unfair and disgusting, the personal attacks that people are making, not just to your brother when we don't have all the information, but to members of your family. So I am sorry for that. Thank you so much for being here. And I can't imagine how difficult this has been for you and your family. Can you just take us back to that night if you can? And I know this is difficult for you to talk about. When did you first hear about what happened? Did the police contact you? Can you take me through that?
I'm really glad you asked me that. I want to start by saying that no one has contacted us. The police never contacted us. I found my brother. My mother was very nervous and concerned because he didn't come home, and that wasn't one of his tendencies. And so I began a search, searching the hospitals. I checked the jails, and there was nothing. And so I began another search for car crashes. And in that search, that's where I discovered or saw what looked like his car. From there, I investigated further and called the coroners. The coroner said that they were unidentifiable, but I knew it was him. And apparently they had some remains of his. So I, at that time, had no choice but to tell my mother that I found him. The coroner wanted us to wait more days to even tell if it was him or not, due to the fact that they have to go about certain processes.
You're telling me to this point the police have not spoken to you or your family? I find that
no one has contacted us.
And you understand, and I'm so sorry you had to make that phone call and go through that. I can't even imagine how difficult that was. But the reason why I bring that up, not just to notify you, but to talk, I would imagine they would have questions about your brother, right? They would want to know things like, okay, did he have any health issues? Or
the toxicology they did show that my brother wasn't under the influence of anything, because he wasn't. He was returning from an interview.
Right.
I had helped him get. He was stopping by my house to let me know how it went, because his birthday. So he was
on the way to your house?
No, he left my house and that happened.
He had just left your house. Oh, boy.
He came by to tell me how well the interview had went, and he was picking up some stuff from the supermarket because the next day was his birthday.
So just a normal day for him?
No, because the next day was his birthday.
And the next day was his, right.
So we were planning a birthday dinner with me, him, and my mother, and he was going to cook himself a meal with my mother, and we were going to all eat. So at that time, when he left my house, he was actually going to returning home to meet with my mother so that they could begin cooking. I mean, I was going to come over later.
Got you. Okay.
Since he did not return and did not come home in the morning, this is what led to the concern, and this is why I did what I did. Now, when I went to the coroner, I had to identify him through various means, and we did. The police never contacted us. Insurance never contacted us. The first people to contact us, and I want this to be known, was Channel 8, and the way they called was very inconsiderate.
I'm sorry to hear that.
The interview I gave them was very, very edited.
Mm-hmm.
And
for the record, we are not editing any of this. We want to hear you out. And I'm sorry if they were inconsiderate. And that's why it is so important.
And
I'm
the
sorry
picture, allow me to say this.
Sure,
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
The
Go ahead.
picture that they showed of my brother, which was a very, very inconsiderate picture, was one that they pulled from the internet, not one asked or granted by the family. We never gave that to them. But the impound did send my mother a humongous bill yesterday about the car, which no one has called about. No one has contacted us. They're saying things on the news about my brother, and I know that they're still investigating. I know that they pulled the CCTV footage.
What you said, though, Talib, is extremely important. So I want you to repeat it if I have it clear. You're telling me that the coroners told you that your brother was not on the influence of anything. No drugs, no alcohol. Did they tell you if there was any type of medical episode?
No, my brother.
Nothing.
My brother didn't have a medical condition. My brother was a physical trainer.
Why are the police
My brother
not releasing
did
that?
1,500 burpees a day. I
Wow.
mean, and anyone who
He was
exercises
in good shape. Yeah,
would know.
that's what he did for a living.
He was actually in exceptional shape.
He was
JD,
exceptional.
put your microphone on.
He was in exceptional shape. You do not get in exceptional shape like that by drinking and hanging out. And my brother had a very hard life, and I moved him here, and my mother moved him here because he was making a very big change in his life. And he was exercising that here in
Even
Las
though
Vegas.
it won't bring your brother back, I am glad to hear that. So let me ask you this, and I'm going by what police are saying. I have no idea what happened that night. I have no clue. I wasn't there. I don't know. And you're right. The investigation is not over with. I want to be very clear on that. But with that being said, police are saying that he caused the crash. Police are saying reckless driving and excessive rate of speed caused the crash. So can you comment on that?
I can. If the police are saying that, one thing I do know is that when someone has done something, the police reach out to the family and let them know that something has happened and that unfortunately a family member was involved or the cause or responsible. No one's reached out to us. They're still investigating. This report that's up there is from December 26th and 27th. These aren't follow-up reports. These aren't any officer making an official statement coming out saying, hey, this is what happened. They're investigating it. 3 of the cars looked like my brother's car. They said he was going down Desert Inn when I know he was going down Durango, making a right onto Desert Inn.
That's very important what you just said. Okay, so you know which direction your brother was going.
Yeah.
So you're saying, and you would know, you're saying they screwed it up. They said he was going in the other direction.
Because the cars look similar.
So what do you think happened?
I mean, well, I don't want to start making assumptions, and I'm not against the police here because I believe the police here in Las Vegas do a very good job. And they do an amazing job. I lived in New York, and I can tell you the cops there are terrible at their job.
You think they're better here?
No, I know they're better here. It's not what I think. It's what I've experienced, right? And the police are way better here.
Well, I'm happy to
And
hear
even
that.
on their tolerance level for some of the things that people do irresponsibly on the road. I've yet to see any driver actually do what they learned on the test.
Right.
That's a fact. Every person who's made a comment on there has been an irresponsible driver. Every day, everyone in this room does something on that road that if another vehicle was in the way and the timing was right, that would lead to them being in an accident.
I am the first person to admit that. I have texted on my phone when I have drove when I shouldn't have done that. I have gone 10, 20 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Everyone here goes over the speed limit.
There's no question. There's no question about that. I agree with you. Can I ask you this, if it's okay? your brother ever been in a car accident before? Do you know of any situations
No.
where he was speeding or driving recklessly?
My brother just got his driver's license almost like a year ago. He didn't even like to drive.
Really?
He didn't even drive. That was
Because he was scared to drive, or he was.
Well, when you grow up in New York,
Yeah.
there's certain things, you just like, I have another brother. He didn't start driving until he was 27, right? This is the train, and nobody wants to deal with the headache
So
of
your
being
brother
in a car.
So your brother Tacuma was only driving for a year.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
So he never got on the highway,
never had any issues.
never got a ticket, never, he didn't get into accidents because he only drove his car to go where he was going.
And the idea that some people might say, well, he must have been in a huge rush to get somewhere. Is that not true?
No.
There was no timing thing or anything like that?
He wasn't in a rush to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And he didn't drive fast. And I've driven with him, and I used to tell him, Tacuma, that's called impeding the flow of traffic.
Right. It's important, though, to note that I'm amazed that police haven't reached out to you and your family. Now, you're saying, and I believe you, I have all the reason in the world to believe you, that your brother was on Desert Inn. The police are saying that he was on Durango. Police are saying that he lost control of his vehicle.
My brother was on Durango.
Your brother was on Durango. Okay.
Police are saying Desert Inn.
They were saying
Okay.
he was
I
on
apologize.
Desert
Right.
Inn. He was on
Right.
Durango. He'd come from my house going down Flamingo, make a left onto Durango.
This is a big
and
part of the
then a
investigation.
right onto Desert Inn.
And then they're saying he was heading towards
Right.
Durango from the Strip
And listen,
on Desert Inn.
There were
No, because he was coming from my house,
Right.
which I don't want to give out my information, but I
No, but-
live toward the 215 in Flamingo.
right.
So, no, why would there's that? That's not even logical.
But this is a
It's
huge part of the investigation.
illogical. Now, if they were investigating completely, they were going to find out where he was coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and to find out where he was coming from would inevitably lead you to me, because
right.
And the
he
issue,
left my house.
Right.
The issue,
And the
it sounds
accident
like to me, is the fact that they haven't contacted the family, they haven't done a
Well,
thorough
that's
investigation,
bizarre.
but they're still releasing his name. To me, that seems like
They got the name
something wrong with protocol.
Listen,
after I
yeah. Listen,
said what I
Talib,
said.
I have a reporter background. I was a news reporter for 10 years. I covered, sadly, a lot of horrific crashes, accidents, so on and so forth. To me, I'm going to use the term bizarre. And the reason why I use it as bizarre, it is bizarre. I would think that they would have wanted to have. I mean, listen, you were hanging out with your brother right before this happened. If I'm an investigator and I'm a police officer, and we'll ask them why they haven't spoken to you, that's a conversation that they should have had with you for obvious reasons. First of all, like you're saying, they're going to figure out which way he was going. That's extremely important to the investigation. He wasn't hanging out at a bar. He wasn't drinking. You would tell the police officer he wasn't doing drugs. He was in a normal frame of mind, normal mood, right? And I don't want to speak for you, but
he was
wasn't
in an excessively happy, positive mood.
Right. He wasn't stressed out. He wasn't in a rush to get somewhere. That's the type of information that I would want. Am I wrong here in investigating this crash? So I'm a little surprised.
Also, you'd have to be insane doing 80 miles an hour on Durango to make a right onto Desert Inn.
That doesn't make sense.
Anyone with any type of driving understanding of telemetry
Right.
will tell you that the apex of that turn will send you out at a diagonal angle, and you go flying across into that shopping center.
No, I agree. That doesn't make sense at all.
Right? And that's on a dry road,
Yeah.
not like our roads, which are exceptionally different to many other roads, because we don't experience a lot of rain. So therefore, the oil and the accumulation of the material from the
Right.
cars, it piles up on our road.
But
so
there-
when we do rain, we have a tendency of all of that oil and stuff, it rises,
Right.
right? Because it interacts with the
And
water.
it had been raining for about 2 or 3 days prior to that accident as well.
Correct.
The roads were a little wet.
If you're just joining us, we are speaking to Talib Kerns. He lost his brother, Tacuma Wesley, the day after Christmas, sadly in a car accident that took the lives of 4 people, 2 of which are still in the hospital in critical condition, is my understanding. Now, there's a lot more questions I would have for you, but have you had any contact at all with anybody that was involved in that crash, that was a witness? Has anybody reached out to you? I know you said police
No
haven't.
one has reached out to me.
Nobody at all.
The only people that reached out to me, like I said, the first people that reached out to me was Channel 8.
Mm-hmm. And when you say they were disrespectful,
I said they were inconsiderate.
or I apologize, inconsiderate. This is why I thought it was very important to start this interview
when I say inconsiderate,
Yeah.
he was telling me about his time constraints and how he had to get this on
He
the air.
cared more about that. Yeah.
That's irrelevant to
I
me.
agree.
I understand that for your job, that's important.
Right.
But
You are a mourning family, and the last thing you want to hear is, "Hey, I got a deadline. I got to do this. I got to do that."
I don't even want to be here doing this.
Right. I understand.
You
But
know?
I understand that, and I know it is extremely difficult for you to talk about this, but at the same time, I also think it is very important to hear your side so the public can understand.
And that is very, very callous,
Yeah.
talking about how he has to break news.
Well, it's absurd. It's ridiculous. And this is why I get angry with certain members of the media because, they're not understanding. This man is grieving here in studio, okay? His family is grieving. He lost a loved one, okay? And people just don't understand that. And that's why I talked about some of these morons on social media that are saying just some of the most horrific things about your family and about your late brother. And I hate to bring that up, but I think it's important
It's okay. You can bring it up.
I mean, the awful things that some people are saying. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that hurts you? I can't even imagine.
Actually, it has no bearing on me.
Mm-hmm.
See, the reality is that's the fundamental psychology of the collective at this time. People it's right now. It's in the nature, right, of our social connective tissue to say whatever we think we feel, right? And I don't doubt some of these people may actually feel this way, right? I don't blame them for what they feel. I'm not upset with how they feel. Mm-hmm. And obviously we live in an era where tools have been provided for people to express how they feel. Mm-hmm. The reality is, though, they are jumping into judgments without fully thinking about the implication of their comments. They're not following it far enough in the chain mm-hmm. of events in their comment. It's an initial. It's the first link in the chain. Mm-hmm. There was an accident. This person did it. These people suffered. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's where they're at. Mm-hmm. The next link in the chain is these people had family.
Right.
The next link in that chain is the loss. The loss has to become real for mm-hmm. everyone involved. Mm-hmm. You see, and when you start going further down the chain, then empathy begins to occur.
Of course.
Because then you can start to see further into the pieces. But it's mm-hmm. media, it's television, it's these first, not facts.
People just want to get their soundbite. They want to get the story out.
And when this story was reported, it was so big, mm-hmm. right? Because it was so horrific and
made
tragic.
National news.
Right? That mm-hmm. they had to be first. Mm-hmm. And they needed a victim. Right. And look, and they needed a bad guy, right? Because it was an accident. Mm-hmm. No one's happy with an accident, right? You lose somebody, you want somebody to blame.
You want to immediately put the blame on somebody.
You
for
see,
what
you
took
want
place.
somebody to blame, even if it's cancer or heart attack.
Right.
Right? But someone just tragically gets taken from the world due to a series of events. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that? How do you get past that, right? So we live in a society where we grew up around what they call the whole hero's journey, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Star Wars, all these good things. So we always need a bad guy, mm-hmm. you see? And unfortunately, in this situation, look at my brother. Look at the picture they showed. I don't need to get into the actual reason here they chose him as the one who did it, right?
Well, let me ask you that. Do you think it was race? Do you think?
I mean, we live in America. Is that really unbelievable? Mm-hmm. Is it a far-fetched concept? Mm-hmm. Is this not something that could apply to?
Well, let me
definitely. If anyone with common sense mm-hmm. would sit down and just run down a couple of common sense questions to themselves, they can see how it's a possibility. Yep. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it would be totally irresponsible to say it's not a possibility.
No, I understand where you're coming. I have a two-part question.
It's definitely a plausible theory.
Yep. I have a two-part question for you. Number one, and I think I asked you this a little bit before. It might be tough for you to answer because you're not an investigator and you weren't there. But number one, how important is it for you and your family to find out what happened, who caused the crash? And number two, do you have, in speaking to you, your family, do you have any idea at all what happened or who you think might have caused this crash? And like I said, how important is it for you and your family to get a little bit of closure at the very least? You're never going to forget. I understand you're always going to hurt from this. But how important is it for your family to find out what really happened?
Well, it's extremely important because we know in our heart what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But to get that understanding from the authorities, the proper authorities, and to have that story out there, right? That's extremely important because my mother is devastated. That was her baby boy. She loved my brother. And she just bought a house for my brother, for them to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And now my mother has to figure out what she's going to do, how she's going to pay for things. I've paid for everything thus far.
And he has a son as well.
And he has a son.
That's grieving as well. That's going to
and
have to grow up
he didn't have
without a
insurance. So
Yeah.
I have to, who's going to pay for things? Who's going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I look up and I see GoFundMe's and everything, and they're calling my brother horrible names as they're speaking horrible things about my mother, who they know nothing about.
That's disgusting.
Right?
Your mother had nothing to do with this. Your family had nothing to do with this. You all are grieving. And I'm going to tell you, I have no tolerance for people like that. I could use other words to describe people like that. That is absolutely disgusting. And when I saw some of that stuff on social media, I was appalled by it. I can't even imagine what the thoughts that went through your mind when you saw stuff like that. Let me ask you, if it's all right, funeral plans. Are you in the process of having a funeral for your brother? For people that may have known him in this town that want to be a part of that?
Well, we've already had a gathering for him, but my brother won't be. We have to cremate him,
Mm-hmm.
and because of the investigation and the state of his body, I won't get my brother back for like a month or so.
Mm.
So we have to stay in a state of limbo.
I understand.
While everyone else is finding their closure.
Yeah,
right.
I can't even imagine how difficult that is, at least to get some closure, to be able to get your brother's body and to be able to hold some sort of funeral. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Talib Kerns. He lost his brother, Tacuma Wesley, in a crash. I believe several cars were involved. 4 people lost their lives. 2 people remain in critical condition. And he is nice enough to join us in studios. He said he doesn't want to have to be here. I wish he didn't have to be here. I wish his brother was still alive. I wish everyone involved was still alive. But I want to take your phone calls as well. And if you have a question for Talib, and hopefully you're on his side as I am. This family is grieving just like all the other family is grieving. And I think it is extremely unfair the way he and his mother and his family have been treated, especially on social media. And maybe you were a witness to this crash. Maybe you can call in and tell us what you saw. I'm sure he would appreciate that. What did you see happen out there? The number to call, 702-257-5396. Again, that number to call, 702-257-5396. Talib Kerns joining us in studio, or just talking about car accidents in general. It happens every day in this town, some far worse than others. Again, that number, 257-5396. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, K-Dawn. All right, welcome back. It is The Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. So glad you could join us on a Friday. Difficult subject to talk about today. It was a horrific accident that took place the day after Christmas. Took the lives of 4 people. Several cars involved. It was a fiery crash at Desert Inn in Durango. And we've been covering the story since that day, trying to figure out exactly what happened, what caused this crash. And the man we have with us in studio, nice enough to be here at a very difficult time for him and his family, is Talib Kerns. He is the brother of Tacuma Wesley. Police are saying, and I say police are saying, even though the investigation is still ongoing, they're claiming that Tacuma was driving recklessly and caused this crash. And we're taking your phone calls at 702-257-5396. Again, that number is 257-5396. Talib, a question that I think needs to be answered is, isn't there video surveillance? And if there is, why haven't they released that? And what is on that video Can you shed some light into that? Because this is right next to a gas station. Obviously, there's cameras there. JD, help him put his microphone on for me. Can you tell me what's the latest on that? Because I would imagine there should be cameras there.
Well, this is why I believe it's still under investigation. I actually saw, when I was looking for my brother that morning, it was still early, and I saw the CCTV footage, and I watched some of it, and I couldn't watch all of it because at that time I was coming to the realization that I was finding my brother and he was gone. But when I had my wife go back to pull it for me, it was pulled down, and the police pulled it down. And this is why I also have the investigator, because I had to contact his insurance. Like I said, no one contacted us. So we had to get everything going. And remember, this right after the holidays, so a lot of things were still closed down and not functioning 100% yet. So a lot of things we had to wait till after the first to actually do. But the investigator has already stated to me that 3 of the cars were the same color, and they were sedans, which means they looked extremely similar. She also let me know that the witnesses didn't see the accident from start to finish. Most people turned around or witnessed it as the accident was occurring. So these cars are sliding, turning. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it was very easy for him to get mixed up and them say, well, it was that car.
It is incredible to me that there are no witnesses that could say definitively, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there are, what exactly took place. There's a gas station right there. It's a fairly busy intersection. My understanding is there were plenty of cars there at the time. I'm amazed that no witnesses have come forward, and maybe they have and we're unaware of it. I'm also amazed that it is an ongoing investigation, yet police have already stated that clearly that they believe that your brother committed this crash, or at least was the cause of it.
Was responsible.
Right,
for
was
it.
responsible for it. So let me just ask you flat out: do you think the police are lying?
I'm not going to go that far and say that the police are lying. See, everything that's coming out is from investigative means through the media sources. So they're speaking with the representative of the police, and then they're taking whatever is said to them, and they're taking that, and they're forming that in their narrative and construction, and then they're presenting that to the public. But the police usually, when they are firmly on the side of something, understand, they'll come out and they'll do a press interview and they'll straighten things out. We have that first officer, and he was very upset because if you are familiar with, like you say, your studio is very close to the scene.
Right down the street.
The people over here drive very fast.
Yes.
They run that light all day long.
Right.
And I've sat and watched when police are in that time where they're ticketing more frequently. I've seen them sit in that area and just write tickets, right? Because that's an area for that people speed through, right? And what I'm hoping is that which I don't know if that will be the case, is that this accident brings more awareness to the living, that everyone out there here in the city that's driving around. I mean, previous to this, we had a man enter onto the 15 the wrong way, killing himself and other people.
And he was intoxicated. Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Well, he was intoxicated,
Yep.
right? But the point is, every time you turn around, there's these accidents that are occurring from reckless driving, which
Absolutely.
seems to be, and which I believe his comment was taken out of context by the news and framed for the context that they wanted it to be in.
And that's possible. That's
Right.
very possible. Being in the business as long as I've been in, that happens from time to time.
So we don't know exactly how much he said and what led up to that aspect of the statement.
I want to put this question out to our listeners, and I say this: have you ever been involved in an accident where the police got it wrong, where the police report was wrong? Have you ever been involved in a crash, whether it be a serious one or not, where the police made mistakes and maybe you were held accountable for an accident and it wasn't your fault? I want to hear from you. I know somebody personally in this town that was a sports reporter. And by the way, the number to call is 702-257-5396. Again, that number is 257-5396. I know somebody personally in this town that was a TV reporter. He's back doing that now, but this was many, many years ago where the media portrayed him out to be a drunk driver that caused a crash. It turns out that did not happen, and he actually filed a lawsuit and won based on faulty information.
And he won almost seven figures, from what I understand.
He won a lot of
a
money.
Major
and
settlement.
He lost his job because of it. So these things can happen. So have you ever been involved in a crash where police made a mistake? The number to call, 257-5396. Why don't we go to Chris first? Chris, thank you for calling into the Vegas Take. You're on with Talib Kerns. Go ahead, sir.
Talib, Brian, I just want to, this is the first I've heard of the story. I'm sitting in my car listening to the whole thing, and I just want to commend both of you guys. I've got a lot of comments, a lot of thoughts. I'm just completely moved by the story. Talib, I appreciate your courage coming on and sharing it. Brian, I appreciate the way that you've conducted the interview. It's just been riveting from my perspective, and I've got so many thoughts. First of all, I just want to say what you just said, Talib. I mean, I'm reflecting as I'm hearing the story, and I'm not a drinker at all or a partier, but I know I can be a bad and reckless driver at times, whether it's texting or not paying attention. And so many of us, including myself, take for granted the precious life that we have, and it's really dangerous, and it's really not okay the way that I personally, or a lot of us out there, take for granted these vehicles and these weapons that we put out on the road. It's just it's very scary and dangerous. And with this city in Vegas growing like it is, there's more and more congestion and traffic and aggressive drivers out there. And this is just really, really touching me, this story, and it's just so heartbreaking because there's so many angles of thought here. So many of us in the society are not empathetic to everything else that's going on around us. We're so instant gratification and everything is so right here and right now that we quickly press the tweet button on Twitter or say stuff without really
you're
understanding every angle.
Chris, you're absolutely right. And by the way, we appreciate those kind words. Thank you for the phone call. Talib, would you like to respond to Chris's comments?
I'd like to say thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, everything you're saying it means a lot to me.
Yeah. 702-257-5396. Why don't we go to Nikki? Nikki, you're next up on the Vegas Take. How are you?
I'm good. So, Talib, I'm sorry for your loss. I had kind of almost the same thing happen to my friend. Her mom went into an intersection. It was a stop sign, and they said that she caused the accident because she was at the stop sign. But it turns out like a year later, the guy was speeding. He hit her, and it's the second time that he's actually caused a fatality. And he sued her insurance and got the money, and now they're going back and trying to find him, and he's like, they can't find him.
Oh, my God, that's horrible.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and she died in the accident with a child in the car.
So, in a way, that family is going through what possibly what Talib's family is going through.
Yeah, and the police blamed her for a while. So her whole family was thinking that her mom did something bad, and
that's horrible.
As I
feeling
said,
really bad about the mom, and
the chain of events.
That's not even what happened.
The chain of events that people don't follow. They just hold on to the first link.
Yeah, Nikki, I appreciate you sharing that story. I wish stuff like that wasn't true. But look, Nikki makes a very valid point, though. This can happen where somebody can cause a very serious accident and maybe lose his or her life. Sadly, as Talib's brother Tacuma lost his life, it doesn't necessarily mean that the police are right.
Right, and I think in this case, too, you have to consider the fact that New Year's Eve was just around the corner, and there was expecting about 400,000 visitors to Las Vegas, and they couldn't have this just up in the air. Because if a tourist is here and they hear that on the news, what are they thinking? I think they had to, despite the fact that there was so much ambiguity in the case, they still had to, again, to create the narrative. They had to, as Talib has said, find a villain in this case, and it happened to be his brother.
The most important thing that we've learned so far, besides the grief that you and your family are going through, is the fact that the toxicology report that I guess you already received is the fact that your brother was not on drugs. Your brother was not drunk. Your brother didn't have a seizure, didn't have any health issues like that. That is extremely important. And the other thing that I think is very important to know, your brother didn't have a history with the law, right? He didn't have a history. He wasn't a lifelong criminal. He didn't have issues with driving in the past. These are important things to know.
And you told me off air, Talib, that your brother had quite a few certifications. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, he had his OSHA. He had his warehouse management, his forklift. He really wanted to be involved in warehouse and construction.
Yeah, see, that's important. It's important to know his background. And when I heard that this crash had happened, and I read and heard some of the police statements, I said, okay, we need more facts. We need to know who this guy was. We need to know what his background was, and even more importantly, which way he was going on the road. Because from what you're telling me, and I believe you, because you saw your brother, sadly, right before this crash happened, you knew which direction he was going. I think that is so important to note, because they're saying he was coming from a completely different direction. How many cars were, from your understanding, how many cars were involved in
7.
this? See, that's unbelievable. So out of those, let me ask you this, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or not. Obviously, sadly, we know your brother passed away, and there were 3 people in that car, family of 5 that passed away. But what about all the people in those other cars? Did they do DUI checks or on any of those other cars that were involved in the crash?
We don't know any of that.
See, that's important.
See, this is my point, right? We know it was 7 cars involved, right? But they only talk about these particular cars.
Right.
Right? And it's very easy to even just begin to say, looking in the direction of, what about the other 3 cars?
Right.
Now, were one of these cars responsible? Could they have done something on the road that caused a chain reaction of events? You see, and they haven't come out about that. They're saying he clearly wasn't coming from the direction they said he was. And in the time that the accident happened, it wouldn't even have been possible for him to say, go down there and say, oh, I got to turn around and come back. You see, so this happened literally. He left my house, drove down the street, made the left, and got into the accident.
So you said you've seen the CCTV tapes. On those tapes, did it show that your brother was not going in the direction that
I
they said he was
saw him
going?
in the right lane on Durango.
Mm.
And when it's coming up, my heart pounded. I couldn't watch any further. I tried to fast forward a little, and then it was all fire.
I find it hard to believe that nobody saw what happened. I'm sorry,
No,
I just do.
Okay. I have seen many tragic things in my life. Mm-hmm. Fortunately and unfortunately. The fortunate part is that it granted me wisdom enough to know how to live a good life and to avoid certain situations. The unfortunate part is that seeing certain traumatic things can psychologically have an effect on you that you can't necessarily control. Mm-hmm. But when trauma happens and you see something traumatic, the mind has a tendency to not know what to do with it. So you'll find a lot of trauma people can't exactly remember everything that happened, but there's usually one aspect that they can't forget.
Right.
You see? So I once saw, when I was living in L.A., I used to be the head of guest relations at the Standard in Hollywood, which was at the time a very big, popular place. And there was a guy on the phone, and he was driving down the street, and he wasn't paying attention, and a little girl ran the street. She fell, and he drove over her head. Mm. And my friend snapped.
Yeah.
He began screaming. And,
yeah, when you see something like that, you don't know how you're going to react.
And the guy, and now everybody's running in the street, and this guy's,
right.
He's on the phone. He doesn't even know what he did. He felt like he might, and then he runs back over her, backing up.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
That's like a scene from The Sopranos or something. That's what it sounds like.
So the mother comes out. She's holding this. She picks up the child. I'm telling her, please put this baby, you're going to kill the baby. You don't touch somebody when they're hurt like that.
Right.
You might injure them further.
Right.
When the paramedics came, since my friend was the first to actually see everything go down and stuff, and the police came, all he could tell them was he ran over her head.
Right. Couldn't say exactly what happened or the specifics of how. And I understand that because it's extremely traumatic when you see something like that.
It's a split second. If
That's
anyone's ever been in a fight, right, it feels like an eternity.
Yeah. But it might be 2 seconds.
But it's no more than 30 seconds.
Right.
The average street fight lasts 2 minutes.
Right. No, that's a good point, and that's a valid point.
So I wouldn't even trust the person turning around and seeing this happen.
Yeah. Well, the only thing we can trust is video.
That's all, and they have the video.
And if they have the video,
they have the video.
Let me ask you this: if they have the video,
they pulled it,
and right, I believe you. And that video, because I haven't seen the video, but if it shows clearly that your brother was not at fault, this is defamation at its finest, is it not? I mean,
at the highest level.
Yeah,
Brian.
if that
Absolutely.
video, and listen, let's be clear here. If there is video, which you're saying there is, and if your brother was not responsible for this crash, he's going to, it's not going to bring him back.
It also might be withholding evidence. Let me ask you this, Talib. When you saw this video, you didn't think to pull out your cell phone. You didn't think to, because you based on the video that you saw, you knew that your brother would not be the one responsible. Correct? You thought that it wouldn't be pinned on him when you saw the video.
Well, I didn't even think about that. I saw that and I knew that he died.
Right.
And I had to go tell my mother.
Which is awful.
The hardest thing I had to do.
Tell your mother,
was go to my mother. You think I could tell her that over? Would you tell your mother over the phone that your brother had died and you had to go find him?
I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you. And
Sit in her face.
Well, here I can't even imagine how hard that must have been.
And not the police.
Yeah, I mean that's awful.
The police should have been the one telling us that.
Of course.
And I don't hold it against them because I don't understand. And this is what I'm asking people to do. Stop holding things against. Let's get a clear, definitive understanding of what occurred.
And that is important.
They do not have that, right? The news is running with, they're saying, oh, well, yeah, he did. He was driving from this direction. But he wasn't.
Right.
Right? Now, we don't know why they chose to frame it that way.
Are you confident? Are you confident eventually the truth will come out?
I'd like to believe that. I mean, to say I'm confident is to like say, are you confident you're going to wake up tomorrow morning?
You never know, obviously. But if
you have lots of, you pretty much live your life like you are going to wake up.
Have you guys hired an attorney?
You don't know. Not at this moment yet. I'm still dealing with the adjuster and in that aspect, and I just finished paying for everything on his half of things. So I need to look at my funds again and see what else I can come up with to even deal with that situation.
You need to get your hands on that video. And an attorney needs to get their hands on that video. Let me ask you this in closing. And again, let me say I am so sorry for what your family has had to go through. This is horrible. No family should have to go through what your family and the other family as well. Condolences to everybody that is involved in this. But let me ask you this as the last question. What do you want people to remember about your brother? Maybe, people that did not know him personally. Can you talk to me a little bit about your brother? What kind of person was he? Just give me a little bit about him that people don't know.
What people don't know is when they're sitting here saying that he was this villain who was being reckless or drinking or doing the millions of things that they've accused him of doing. What they didn't know is that my brother did everything to change his life and be a better man. That's what they don't know. And when he died, he was in the process of being that better man.
What did he have to go through as far as any adversities in his life that you can share with us?
Well, my brother had a very difficult childhood along with myself, as most inner city children do. I don't need to give that spiel.
But he was able to turn his life around.
He got involved with people that were the unsavory type, in my opinion, and they got him into that lifestyle of, and I'm going to be honest with people, because a lot of people, when people pass away, they're not honest about who the person was. They only remember the things that they mostly cherished about them, right? But I'm honest. My brother had joined a gang, and he refused to listen because he was trying to be his own man, because the system had, psychologically, when you're socially stratified into the lower group, you look at coming up in the world from the means of which your socially stratified environment provides. Right? So my brother, being a very good, loyal person that he is, got involved in the streets, and he was loyal to the wrong people, and it got him locked up in jail. And my brother did 8 years in prison. And in that 8 years in prison, my brother received every certificate you could receive in prison and was let out early on a furlough, where I moved him here. And he did so good, they let him off parole early. He had his life back. He didn't want to do anything to ruin that.
Right.
and he drove cautiously because he was proud that he got his license. He was happy because he was doing what he, as a young person, when he was young, didn't believe he could do.
Right.
Right? Move out of his socially stratified psychology. And he did that. And he was proud of it. And what he did was he became a trainer. He took all those years of being in there, instead of wilding out and doing all the things people do in there, he took that opportunity to work out and take the books I sent him and become a new man. And when he came home, he was that new man.
Well, if anything, I'm sure it won't make anything better right now, but if anything, you and your family can take pride in that, in the fact that your brother, it sounds to me your brother did turn his life around for the better.
He was here 3 years before this happened.
3 years.
3 years. He worked at CES. He loved it. He was going to work there this year before he passed.
Is there anything, because we only have about a minute here, is there anything that we have not covered in this hour that you want to say that I haven't already asked you?
There, you know, for the people out there, I'd like to say that my mother is the one that is, and myself, is broken by this situation. And I would ask that, you know, my mother lost her son. Please stop attacking my mother. It's going to take her a long time to heal. And doing these things aren't going to help that. And I just want to say before we get off the air that I'm so sorry to the family that lost someone in that. I know that people died in there. And I know that those people are sitting around right now and that lawyers and other people are trying to take advantage of them in their pain right now. Say, you need the money. You have to get the money. You need the money.
Doesn't bring people back.
But it's never going to fill that hole. And I hope that my words of condolences and that me and my mother are terribly, terribly sorry for your loss. And you are in our prayers and thoughts. And we hope you can heal because we're going to try to.
I think that's very well said, Talib. And I appreciate you coming in. Like I said, I wish we could have met under different circumstances. I wish you didn't have to be here to talk about this. But I do appreciate the fact that you did come in and give your side and the struggles that your family are going through. There are two families that are struggling. They're not the only ones. You are as well. And I think that's very, very important to know. Well, listen, all I can say is this, if I haven't already said it, besides, you know, thoughts and prayers to you and your family, is the fact that I do hope that Metro Police do their due diligence. And if this is in fact true, and I have no reason not to believe you, that your brother was not the cause of this crash. If that is in fact true, then police need to do their due diligence and need to clear your brother's name. It certainly will not bring him back. It probably will not help the horrible pain that you and your family are suffering. But, you know, you deserve to know the truth.
Can I ask you to leave on this note?
Sure.
I want people to know that no one contacted us. And no one has contacted us to date about this.
That's a problem.
And I want people to know out there, think about the suffering we have to go through to even for no one to have contacted us.
It doesn't make any sense from a reporter standpoint, from a legal standpoint.
It's actually surreal to think about it.
And I'm glad you shared that with us because I'm going to continue to pounce on that. And we have connections with people over there at Metro. We had Larry Hatfield, who was a Metro PIO, who was in studio yesterday. We're going to ask him those questions. We're going to find out why they haven't reached out to your family. That doesn't make any sense to me. Talib, thank you so much for the courage to be able to come in here and talk a little bit about your brother. We really do appreciate you for doing that. And again, our condolences, thoughts, and prayers to you and your family. And if there's any news or anything we can do to help you and your family, you are welcome back anytime, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. All
Thanks
right,
a lot, Talib.
take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDAWN.